It is indeed an honor for me to welcome you all to this important stakeholder meeting, whose main objective is to share experiences of electoral systems and gender quotas in the SADC region. On that note, allow me, ladies and gentlemen, again to extend a warm welcome to our guests from Namibia, Lesotho, Mauritius, and from Gender Links, who have come here to share their experiences with us. For the benefit of our visitors, the Zimbabwe Gender Commission is one of the 5 independent commissions established in terms of Section 232, subsection C, paragraph C of 245, and Section 245 of the Constitution, which has been operationalized through the Gender Commission Act. The overall responsibility of the Commission is to facilitate the promotion of gender equality and equity, as well as ensuring that gender equality provisions of the Constitution are adhered to. The Commission has the following specific mandate as outlined in Section 246 of the Constitution: to monitor issues concerning gender equality and to ensure gender equality as provided in the Constitution, to investigate possible violations of rights relating to gender, to receive and consider complaints from the public and to take such action in regard to the complaints as it considers appropriate, to conduct research into issues relating to gender and social justice, and to recommend changes to laws and practices which lead to discrimination based on gender, to advise the public and private institutions on steps to be taken to ensure gender equality, to recommend affirmative action programs to achieve gender equality, to recommend prosecution for criminal violations of rights relating to gender, to secure appropriate redress where rights relating to gender have been violated, and to do everything possible to promote gender equality. Ladies and gentlemen, this meeting is built up to the activities of engendering constitutional and electoral reforms that Zimbabwe Gender Commission and its stakeholders, civil society, UN partners, and the task force have been tirelessly working on since the May 9 workshop. Indeed, the work at hand requires concerted effort by all stakeholders. Your presence here and the journey that we have walked with you is a clear testimony to your commitment to improve women's representation in politics and other levels of decision making. The Commission sincerely recognizes and acknowledges your efforts. This meeting, therefore, offers us another opportunity to continue with our discussions on the best methodology for Zimbabwe to guarantee equal representation of women at both House of Assembly and local government level. Since the Zimbabwe Gender Commission is a constitutional body whose key mandate is to monitor issues concerning gender equality and ensure realization of gender equality as provided in the Constitution, we reiterate that the 2023 elections, Zimbabwe must achieve the 50-50 at both House of Assembly and local government. The Constitution has already laid out the indisputable basis for gender equality. Section 17 of the Constitution provides that the state must promote gender balance to ensure that women fully participate in all various spheres of the Zimbabwe society. Section 56 guarantees gender equality and non-discrimination. And Section 8 also provides that every woman has full and equal dignity of person with men, and this includes equal opportunities in political, economic, and social activities. The question that we continue to ponder is, what methodology are we going to use to actualize the 50-50 at both House of Assembly and local government level? And this 50-50 provision is not only contained in our Constitution, it's also contained in the SADC Protocol on Gender and Development. In view of the above, allow me to briefly share with you through our consultations, we are now convinced that 50-50 can be achieved if the country adopts the 50-50 principle for all direct election seats through enactment of legislation to ensure constitutional compliance. Our deliberations today should therefore interrogate how we can learn from experiences from other SADC countries with locally proposed measures and methodologies whose results are intended to achieve gender parity at all levels. As I conclude, I wish to express our sincere appreciation to our partners, namely UN Women, Africa Women Development Fund and Gender Links for the financial and technical support towards hosting this exchange visit and this stakeholder meeting. With these few words, I wish you fruitful deliberations. I thank you.
It gives me great pleasure to deliver a few remarks at this important gathering for discussing and strategizing on the best ways to increase women's political participation here in Zimbabwe. I'd like to congratulate the Zimbabwe Gender Commission for taking the initiative to follow up on the great debate which was held in May. By inviting technical experts from other SADC countries to give insight and inspiration for Zimbabwe, we see that the commitment and investment is substantial. As UN Women, we hope that this meeting provides not only clarity, but a roadmap for the Gender Commission to fulfill its mandate of addressing systemic barriers to gender equality in terms of accessing public office at the national and local level, whether elective or by appointment. Indeed, the Constitution provides equality between the sexes in all spheres in society and maintains the obligation of the state to take the necessary measures to ensure equal representation in decision-making. However, the Gender Commission still has its work cut out for them. Important actors who pushed for these provisions were groups such as the G20 and other gender equality activists who galvanized around the constitution-making process, successfully lobbied for the inclusion of the establishment of the Gender Commission. The baton has now been handed over to them, or it's being shared with the Gender Commission to push the gender agenda forward. Women's equality, women's equal political rights and the right to full participation in public life has been recognized internationally through the ratification of several international and regional frameworks that provide for the advancement of women in politics and decision-making. These include the CEDAW, which is the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, and the well-known Maputo Protocol here in Africa, the SADC Gender Protocol, among others. Zimbabwe's constitution toward this effort introduced a special measure in line with CEDAW, which led to 15% increase in women's representation in 2013. Unfortunately, Zimbabwe, like many other countries, continues to have many structural and administrative barriers to women's participation and representation in political and governance processes, including entrenched patriarchal norms and standards that foster the perception that women are not legitimate and effective political leaders as men. This also extends to then the abuse of women within the political sphere as they try to pursue political participation, which is something that I'm sure the Gender Commission takes on seriously. In the case of women's representation as political candidates standing for public office, one challenge is electoral systems themselves. For Zimbabwe, elections are still held under the first past the post election system. This winner-takes-all system continues to perpetuate the predominance of one-party system and hinders a polarity of voices and perspectives within governance structures. Globally, the first past the post system has also been a systematic barrier to women's representation in governance institutions such as parliament and local government structures. Women's political participation globally at the parliamentary level stands at only 23.3%. That means that women only occupy 1 out of 4 positions worldwide. UN Women welcomes this stakeholders meeting that will explore and forward the goal of inclusive and equal electoral systems. We note that stakeholders like the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, with whom we collaborate with to develop a national gender policy, are also present or shall be present, recognizing the importance of this innovative approach of Chapter 12 commissions working to uphold Section 17 of the Constitution to create a more equal society. We're happy to see that the Commission has gone beyond their borders and sought learnings, knowledge and support from other countries. This implies Zimbabwe is not alone in this push for gender equality. As Zimbabwe works to get it right, it will also be a source of knowledge for other countries experiencing the same. South-to-South cooperation and learning is important towards a world of gender equality. So it's really a pleasure to see other people from other countries on the African continent in this room. Ladies and gentlemen, as we discuss best practices and deliberate on the options that stand before Zimbabwe, we should note that the journey Zimbabwe has taken to date. In 2018, Zimbabwe's parliament had 19% women without the special measures. And in 2013, after its introduction, the figure rose to 34%. This meeting is timely because it's important that Zimbabwe takes this opportune moment with a lead time of 5 years to decide on the best policy before the next elections. We have seen countries backslide when special measures expire, no substitution is put in place, and no substitution is put in place. In Bangladesh, women's representation went from 10% to 2% following the expiry of the women's quota, which is a clear indication that the issue of expirations of the women's quota needs full attention and addressing. Several African countries have used special measures such as quotas and electoral systems in order to fast-track equality. And nowhere in the world has the success been as impressive as in Rwanda, where women's political representation in parliament stands at 61.3%. This is the highest figure in the world. The way they achieved this was through a combination of PR system and legislative women's quotas. As we have seen in other countries, 50-50 in elected positions are not only the results of policies, but also required a significant political commitment and concerted effort from political parties to make this, in order to make this happen. And countries also have to have an inclusive and equal political will. In 2018, Ethiopia, which only has voluntary party quotas, became the first country in Africa with a 50-50 in cabinet. This is because the ruling party has consistently fielded women candidates and in this case appointed women to ministerial positions. This year, South Africa joined them, also appointing 50% women ministers in cabinet. Both feats are the results of concerted efforts from the ruling parties in both countries to uphold their commitments to voluntary party quotas. However, historically, for women to achieve 50-50, it has been a long journey. In Scandinavia, an incremental approach was taken in which they used social policies targeting women's education in order to ratify historical imbalances. This was because of the limited spaces to discuss women's equal participation in politics altogether. Today, they are some of the best examples of countries in relation to gender equality. But it took them 60 years to pass the 20% threshold and 70 years to reach the 30% representation of women in parliament. Therefore, we must acknowledge that Zimbabwe has made significant strides toward constitutional provisions and a political space that discusses gender equality and the measures needed to achieve these goals. This has been achieved in less than 30 years, but the journey still continues.
It's so good to see the Zimbabwe Gender Commission going away from being an event-oriented organization to one that is looking at systemic change. And also, Chair, to the fact that you have started early, that you started 4 years before the election, because all too often we wait until the day before the election and then it's too late. So makorokoto for what you're doing in terms of taking this agenda forward. As my colleagues will say, particularly my colleague from Mauritius, the fact that you start here in Zimbabwe with strong constitutional provisions is such an advantage. In Mauritius, they had to amend the constitution before they could even get a quota. So it's an uphill struggle. But you have this enabling clause, Article 17. With or without the sunset clause, Article 17 says there shall be gender parity in all areas of decision making. So it's there. It's something that we are able to use, okay? What we've picked up also, listening to the conversations yesterday, is that there is a consensus. There's no longer a question. If we were having this conversation 5 years ago, 10 years ago, people will still be contesting the very notion of 50-50. That debate is over, yeah? It's no longer about the what, it is about the how. All the answers are right here in the SADC region. Within this region, we have every single possible electoral system and its combination with or without voluntary, constitutional, or legislative quotas. It's all here, right at our doorstep. And our visitors here represent that. We have a first-past-the-post system in Mauritius. We have a PR system in Namibia. We have a mixed system in Lesotho. So all those examples you will have from our experts who are here. Just a quick recap of where we've come from in Zimbabwe, 2008, 2013, 2018. Because we see in Zimbabwe the same kind of yo-yo that I'm going to show you in the SADC region, okay? So in many respects, we don't even have to go to SADC. Even within Zimbabwe, we can see the difference that electoral quotas and electoral systems make. So very clearly in Parliament, let me take that example, in the National Assembly, we saw with the introduction of the quota in 2013, how we jumped up from 14% to 32% and then went backwards a little bit in the last election. But that's a quota right there. That's what did it, yeah? Conversely, in local government, where there is no quota, we have just been going backwards. 18%, 16%, 14%. Need we go any further to see the effect that systems have on women's representation? But let us go a little further to the SADC region. Here is the yo-yo that is SADC. Huh? Parliament, cabinet, and local government. Let's start with the good news. That's 50%. You can see we have instances where we are almost at 50% in SADC. We also have a bunch of countries sitting over here that overall are doing much better than a bunch of countries that are sitting down here at less than 15%. So the question is, why? We need to unpack these numbers a little bit to understand what is happening. So there are formal factors and there are informal factors. Let me start with the informal factors. Socialization, attitudes, custom, culture, tradition, patriarchy across the whole globe, no matter where you go. So here in Zimbabwe in the last election, we had women candidates, Vachins Mahure, right? Prostitutes, yeah? But hey, it's not only here. In the US, she couldn't satisfy her husband, she won't satisfy America. The simple fact is worldwide, there's not a single instance I can think of where there has been rapid increase in women's representation without some kind of special measures of one kind of it. Call it social engineering if you like, you know? There's no way you're going to change all of those things without a little bit of social engineering. That's what we have to do, and all the evidence shows us. So, look at these numbers. The numbers don't lie, okay? These are numbers from the SADC region. These are electoral systems with quotas, without quotas. So the overall story, women in parliament in SADC, overall 26%. In the first past the post countries, 13%. In the PR countries, 38%. In the mixed system, 34%. Numbers don't lie, yeah? Where we have quotas, the overall picture is 38%. But in first past the post, only 15%. In PR, 38%. In mixed, 37%. Again, the conclusions are failure. Without a quota, 13%, 36%. Overall, 16%. It's very, very evident that electoral systems and quotas make a difference about it. First past the post, winner takes all, right? Constituencies, different candidates run, they compete against each other. A system that, as we've seen, is very, very unfriendly to women. Because you could field all the women you like in these constituencies. But if they are not in seats where they're going to win, they will lose. So you will not get the result that you want, okay? You know, we've played around with the, shall we reserve seats? And Tate Polo will talk about this in Lesotho, where they began with a system where they said, okay, for one election, 1/3 of the seats will only be women, women contesting against women. The next election, it will move to another, set of seats, and then it will move to another set of reserved seats. As Tate Polo will tell us, problematic, because again, then become challenged. Then say, we're being excluded, yeah? They're open to constitutional challenge. So, very, very difficult in a first-past-the-post system to guarantee the outcome.
We started by a one-day training with the political parties and the leaders of the political parties. So the executive heads of the political parties, where there were discussions around why should women be represented in parliament. And believe me, at that time, I was active in NGOs, gender NGOs. I was a student myself. There were so many stereotypes about women, so many. And what was ironical is that in Mauritius, women do better at school, much, much better than men. And still they were like, do all these women qualify? Will they know how to behave in parliament? Do they know how to work on a file? Do they know how to work on agriculture economics? But we do better in these subjects at school, so how come we don't know? There were many stereotypes around women. And it did not change a lot because the stereotypes were there and all the barriers. Even men who were saying, we believe in it, say, but you know, they won't win, we have to win. And I will explain to you why this rationale, like today, it's not completely gone, but they understand that women are here and can do actually many things. So, Gender Links conducted, there was not a lot of actions, but there was an effort by some political parties in 2005 to have more women candidates. There was an effort, and it increased slightly. But then in 2007, Gender Links conducted a study to show representation, and it was the first kind of studies which actually showed representation of women, and it was very drastic. The reason why it was 18.3, it was worse before. It's because actually there was this one-day workshop, and candidates did their best to have women as candidates. But it's that like voluntary doesn't work that much. But in local government it was even worse. It was 6.4 representation. So in 2009, there was a lobbying campaign which was organized by the Gender Links CEO in Mauritius. Also, there was the training of women. Why did actually Gender Links, and not only Gender Links, women organizations in Mauritius collaborate and start the training of women who wanted to go into politics? Also, any woman, because I was also trained and I was not interested in politics at that time. So why did they start it? It's because of the stereotypes. Like, women won't know how to campaign, women won't know how to behave in local government, in parliament, because of all these stereotypes. But the truth is that women have been so much at home in the private sphere of affairs, but by socialization they didn't know how it worked in the public affairs. But once they socialized and learned in the public affairs, we are doing very well now, because women were not exposed to it in the same way. So that was the main issue. And that's how the training was relevant. The training was not how to read and write. It was politics. What is politics about? What is campaigning about? How to actually build alliances, because no politician can survive without a power base, an electoral base. And you need alliances, you need allies. You cannot stand alone as a candidate. But women didn't know all these rules of politics, especially under the first part. Especially under the first part of the post. So the problem continued. There was a general election. So these were the training. So it all started like with training, with sensitization, with empowering women who wanted to be in politics. But there was still no quota. So in 2010, there were the general elections again, after the 2005 elections, and women representation increased to 19% at the National Assembly. So, and for local government, it was still very low. So the director of gender links went to the minister of local government, saying since 2005, for 5 years, you have publicly stated, even the prime minister publicly stated that something had to be done. The executives of political parties, the highest executives said something has to be done, but nothing was really done about it. It was mostly NGOs working to empower women. And following this meeting, there was a media campaign to advocate for a quota. There was a media campaign to showcase women leaders. Because why? It's something that it works, this is how it works in politics. And I think politicians do it. If you're not perceived as a leader, if you're not perceived as someone that can take representation, someone that people can rely on, nobody will vote for you. Because people don't vote for you because you're a woman. They will vote for you because you can represent them and you can actually help them in what they do.